All right. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good day, and hello to everyone who's joining in. We'll just give a few moments for our attendees to come in to this webinar. This with the faculty members at the Jindal School of Government and Public Policy to talk about the MA in Public Policy offered by OP Jindal Global University in conjunction with Coursera. I'm just going to allow a few more moments for people to come in. Right at the outset, I would like to state that this is a Q&A session, which means that we'll be looking eagerly and we'll be looking forward to having your questions. Our dear learners, any questions that you may have about the admissions process, about the course, the curriculum, the pedagogy, the learning outcomes, and so on and so forth. But first, allow me to start by introducing my panelists for today. I have the honor and the pleasure of introducing Professor R Sudarshan, who's the Dean of the Jindal School of Government and Public Policy. He's had a distinguished career in research, development programming, and governance. He was a Rhodes Scholar to Balliol College, University of Oxford, and he obtained a master's degree in politics in 1977. He was also elected to a research fellowship at St. John's College at Cambridge, where he studied the judicial review of economic legislation by the Supreme Court of India. Following that, he served for over 30 years in the United Nations system, particularly in the UNDP. I also have with me Professor Rajeev Malhotra, who is a professor at the Jindal School of Government and Public Policy and the director for its online program on public policy. Now, he's been a civil servant, a development economist with over 28 years of experience. He's worked with the government of India, where until August 2012, he was the economic advisor to the then Union Finance Minister. He's also worked for the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in Geneva, and now translates his real-world experience into classroom experiences for our learners. So I'd like to begin, Dean Sudarshan, by requesting you to give us a brief overview of the program, of the public policy program that we are offering in conjunction with Coursera. Dean Sudarshan, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Arjya, for that introduction. I'm very, very happy to introduce the online public policy program by first emphasizing that the study of public policy, it seems, it's an idea whose time has come, as they say. You know, public policy as a discipline in universities and courses has been long established in the United States. And that's because of the nature of the US government, and the way the US government works is that every time the administration changes at any level, local, city, state, or the federal level, the people who come into office appoint at the policy-making level people who advise them on policy. So for a long time in the United States, anyone who has an interest in public service, no matter whether the person is an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer, would also do a degree in public policy to understand how policies are made, how can they be made well, and they may be called upon at some point in their careers, in whatever profession it be, to serve the state, as it were. But in other countries, particularly in the British system of a permanent civil service, policy making was devolved to a set of permanent people in the civil service who served different political masters. No matter what ideology the political party in power may have, it would be the same people who would say, okay, we will take the cue from the political masters and formulate the policies that would advance the agenda of the political masters, because the people have given a mandate to it. But all that's changed now, in that governments all over the world realize that it's impossible to make public policy properly only by relying on a set of generalist civil servants. And therefore, they increasingly rely upon think tanks, research institutions, universities, academia, to do the analysis that is the background or to produce the evidence for making policy, and also depend on outsourcing the evaluation and the monitoring of the working of public policy. So a whole lot of avenues for employment have opened up in recent times all over the world for people who have taken the time and trouble to acquire a qualification in public policy, which is to understand basically what policy making is all about and how do you make policies effectively, how do you make them work.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Dean Sudarshan. I completely agree that public policy is an idea whose time has come. And it seems that every aspect of our lives, whether it is our personal lives or our professional lives, have been touched by public policy in some sense of the term, right? Over to you, Professor Malhotra. I'd like to ask as to what's the structure of this course. Now, I would like to mention that we did a webinar very similar to this a few months ago, but I think it might be useful for our learners to understand the structure of this course and the curriculum. Of course, we will be taking questions from our learners and we look forward to those questions as well. Over to you, Professor Malhotra.
Thank you, Professor Majumdar, and hello, everybody. It's very good to be here and having this opportunity to interact with you in the course of the next hour or so. So as we set out to structure this program, we had a couple of considerations in our mind. The first one was that many of you would be working professionals and would have put in a certain number of years of work before you were thinking of, before you get down to enrolling in a program like this. So that consideration meant that we had to keep our structure sensitive to the needs that matter for this cohort of people. The second consideration was that since you are working professionals, you would all have a very limited time to devote, and one had to work out the workload of this program in such a manner that it wasn't a drain on your time. You could very well manage your work as well as your desire to upgrade your knowledge. So these considerations were very critical. And third, we wanted to make sure that our program actually exposes you to the developments in this discipline at a global level, both the knowledge element of the developments in the discipline and the competency element, so that you could graduate as a public policy master's, which prepare you to compete with anyone from anywhere in the world at a fair level. So with these considerations out to developing the curriculum, our curriculum actually has two parts to it. We look at certain core subjects, which we call essential and foundational subjects. These you cover in the course of the first 3 semesters, or rather 2.5 semesters. And then we provide you with the option of choosing 5 other courses, which are elective courses. And the idea behind these elective courses is to provide you the option of specializing in an area of your interest. Having said that, so that's about the theory and the conceptual knowledge building part of the course, but there is a practice element to it also. So we have integrated 2 capstone projects in our curriculum. Capstone projects, the objective essentially is to test your learning as you are learning. So we have structured first capstone project at the end of the second term or the second semester. This is meant to be a group exercise and also to provide you with an opportunity where some of you can pool in the diverse experience and disciplinary skills and knowledge that you bring into this program to work together and address the problem which has been assigned. Following this first project, we have another project at the end of the fourth term before you graduate, which is going to be a solo project. Each one of you will be attempting that project on your own. Again, based on a choice you exercise on the topic that you want to work on, and you are expected to then provide a report, a sort of a thesis on the subject that you have chosen. In undertaking these two projects, you would be guided by assigned faculty. So this is the broad structure, and I could say a word or two about the pedagogy. We are going to provide you with a lot of asynchronous material, which allows you to pick up the learning process in a flexible sort of a manner, depending upon the time that you have. And we have interspersed this part of learning with certain live sessions. These live sessions give you an opportunity to interact with your instructors, to clarify doubts, to pick up issues among yourselves and debate them, and so on and so forth. So let me just stop here, and I could come back to further detailing some of these elements as required in the course of the Q&A.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Professor Malhotra. I think it's really important for our learners to understand that this is a program that is steeped not only in theory, but through the capstone projects, they will be able to apply whatever they've learned in sort of real life scenarios, I hope. I'd like to focus a little bit on the first semester or the first sort of set of courses. Could either you or Dean Sudarshan, whoever would like to take it up, would you like to talk a little bit about the first semester courses and what is the content within that course?
Can I, before Rajeev explains in more detail, say a few words about the overall philosophy of what we are doing in public policy? See, public policy is not any one discipline. It's not economics only. It's not sociology. It's not political sociology. It's not political science only. It draws insights from multiple disciplines, psychology, economics, and so on. So public policy is about getting people to behave in ways, tackling problems that they face, which would be ultimately beneficial to them. So, if people, for instance, we want people to behave in a responsible way during the COVID pandemic, wear a mask, try and get a vaccination as early as possible, and be mindful of closed spaces and holding parties and intermixing, minimizing, keeping social distance. All of these we've all now been very familiar because of the pandemic, but all these require fundamental behavior changes because naturally human beings like to hug and embrace one another when they meet old friends or when they are together with people. And now you are asking them keep social distance, wear a mask, and so on, which is all very, in a way, artificial and difficult. So policy is all about changing behavior. And in a way, you can have policies at home. And if parents tell a child, you shall not watch television after 10 p.m. or play video games after that time, you're laying down a policy. But having laid down the policy, you must figure out how to make that child conform to that policy, right? Now, there you must understand the psychological disposition of the child, what you may need to do by way of enticing, incentivizing the child to follow. And normally, if you just threaten and say that dire consequences will follow, there is an instinctive tendency on people to rebel against that, which means you have to have a very subtle understanding of how to persuade. Public policy is finally all about how to persuade people to do the things that they ought to do for their own good. Now, this means drawing from multiple disciplines. So our course is structured in such a way that we draw key insights from many disciplines. And one of the disciplines is, of course, economics, but then we also have a course which Rajeev can talk about a bit more, called the Social Foundations of Public Policy, which has to do with the other social sciences that are important for public policy, in addition to economics.
Right. Let me just come in quickly and build on what Dean Sudarshan has said. So in our thinking, we identified three so-called essential, or no, not essential, so-called foundational courses that we wanted you to begin with. Out of these three foundational courses, we are including two in our first semester. The first one is called Economics for Public Policy. The second one is called Social Foundations of Public Policy. The third foundational course is relating to the issue of law, institutions, and governance. We are holding up that till a bit later, because we also want to introduce in the first semester certain theoretical subjects which are essential for building up and taking the essential component of this program forward. So besides the two that I mentioned, Economics for Public Policy and Social Foundations of Public Policy, the two other courses that you're going to be looking at in the first term are Statistical Methods and Data Analysis, a very critical part of any public policy program, because it equips you how to understand information, and based on information and the evidence that it provides, take the kind of decisions which are relevant in the context in which you may be working. So that's the third subject. And the fourth subject is a typical subject from economics, the microeconomics. So four subjects, just to repeat once again: Social Foundations of Public Policy, Economics for Public Policy, Statistical Methods and Data Analysis, and Microeconomics. And then we build on these as we move on to the next semester, where the other foundational course, Law, Institutions, and Governance, would be one of them. There'll be another theory course, and then we'll be balancing some of these competency-based courses and analytical technique-based courses, which will kind of equip you to deliver on what we promised in this program.
Thank you so much for that, Professor Malhotra. I've got a couple of questions on open already, and I think this would be a good opportunity for us to segue into the graduate outcomes and the learning outcomes from this program. So Ian Lee asked or states that, as professors mentioned, this program is designed for the working profession. And he asked how well this program prepares anyone who's interested in pursuing a doctorate later on. Now, would you say that one of the graduate outcomes of the MA in Public Policy offered in conjunction with Coursera could possibly lead to a career in academia, apart from the other career avenues that our learners would have?
Yeah,
either one of them, either one of you could answer that.
No, there's definitely, the thing is that after you do this master's course, I think all the students would have a large number of issues that they would like to get into or understand at greater depth. And therefore, if someone wishes to do a doctoral program, you see, one of the difficulties that many PhD students have is, what am I supposed to do my doctorate on, right? How do I find a topic? What I can assure someone interested in a doctorate is that at the end of this program, you will have so many questions and issues that problem of what is it that I ought to be working on won't really be there, because you would have already made up your mind as to what requires more in-depth investigation that is best done through a doctoral degree. And after that, you may still be a public policy practitioner, not necessarily a teacher in the subject, but you may also wish to go to teach, right? So that's a decision that's personal. Different people will make different choices in that. But acquiring a doctorate is generally a matter of personal satisfaction to many people. Not that it's going to guarantee that because you have the doctorate, you'd be a better public policy practitioner. That doesn't necessarily follow.
Let me just add very quickly to that response. In my understanding, there are three things that you need to pursue the discipline at a further higher level than a master's degree. First of all, you need to have a good master's degree, which we promise you. The second is that you need to have those skill sets that will allow you to undertake research. So we provide you an opportunity to pick up those skill sets. And most importantly, through the curriculum we have set for you, including the Capstone projects that I mentioned, you will have, or you will rather build a confidence to undertake research independently, which is the starting point for doing a doctoral program. Apart from the fact that you need to know what are the areas you want to work, what are the typical debates in that area that need to be understood and to then lead you to the kind of question you want to pursue further.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Professor Malhotra and R Sudarshan. We've had a couple of more questions coming in, but I'd just like to stay on this topic a little bit about graduate outcomes and what our learners can expect beyond the MA in public policy. So could you talk a little bit more about the skill sets that they should be picking up? I know, Professor Malhotra, you mentioned skills in research, etc. Are there any other skills that our learners should look forward to picking up in the course of this program?
So when we talk of skill sets for a public policy practitioner, the two most important skill sets are to be able to deploy qualitative and quantitative analytical skills in understanding and examining a problem that he or she is working on. And both these skills are part of our curriculum. Apart from that, one major area which is very central to the discipline of public policy is to understand how are things panning out, how are the initiatives that have already been taken as a part of, let's say, a policy program of a particular country, how are they faring, how are they perceived by the beneficiaries, the stakeholders of that policy in any country or a regional context. And for that, you need to be up to speed with what we call project evaluation management techniques. And so we are going to expose you to that. Above all, although we don't have specific programs or courses for you as a part of this curriculum, which will help you improve your writing skills, your communication skills, that unfortunately we don't have. But as a part of your work on your capstone projects, considering that that is being undertaken under the guidance of a faculty, there will be an opportunity and you will be getting live feedback. You get live feedback on not only your research work, but also you get feedback on your term end assessments for the different courses you do. And as a part of that feedback, you will get inputs which will perhaps help you in improving your communication and your writing skills, which are critical for any discipline, not just public policy. So,
right. Thank you so much for that, Professor Malhotra. The questions seem to be streaming in now. Let's take a few more. An anonymous attendee is asking, are there any specialized or elective courses on policy for sustainability or on climate change? I know we mentioned a few elective courses, so we've got people who've been wondering whether they could take up courses based on climate change as well.
Yes.
Well, if I can jump in and answer that, elective courses, there are lots of options, but we'd like to get a feel of what the cohort that's joining the program are interested in. As a university, we are able to draw upon faculty from not just the School of Government and Public Policy, but also from other schools. And we have a very good School of Environment and Sustainability, for instance. And climate change is of special interest to public policy practitioners because it is what public policy studies call a wicked problem. In other words, a wicked problem is one where, the solution is not altogether immediately obvious. And if you attempt to solve it in the one way, you might be creating some other problems, right? So, there's talk about renewable energy, there's talk about electric vehicles, there's talk about, green hydrogen. Now, each one of them comes associated with another set of problems. So one of the problems in public policy is to tackle something like climate change, which also requires a lot of behavioral change in people, changing their consumption habits and so on. And therefore, it is because it is a classic example of a wicked public policy problem, it's very likely that we will find brilliant faculty to be able to offer an elective, provided that there is a substantial number of students joining this program who want it. Now, if there's only one or two who are particularly interested in that elective, then it may not be worth our while to offer it as an elective. But if a significant number, by that I mean about 20, 25 students wish to take that, we will be responsive. So what I'm trying to say is we are beginning this program now, but when it comes to electives, we have to do it, decide on the electives based on the preferences and the feedback of the cohort of students who are signing up to the program now.
Right.
Let me quickly also add, I completely endorse what the Dean has just mentioned, but let me just give you a kind of our vision statement on electives here very briefly. Depending upon what is the demand, of course, we will be responding to that. And note that electives don't kick in until the middle of the third term. So we have time to figure out which ones we have to offer. But as a perspective, what we have done is we have 6 broad areas in which we will offer you electives. First one is economic policy and reforms. The second one is set of electives on analytical techniques. Some of you may be wanting to pick up these techniques at a much higher level than what the core courses enable you to do. So we're going to have specialization in analytical techniques. It will look at data visualization and social analytics, econometrics, project evaluation methods and practice and things like that. The third group is environment policy. So squarely, we are going to address some electives in that group, followed by social policy, which is about health, education. And then we are going to have a group of electives under land, labor, and urban development. These are issues which are very important in the developing South, in the developing countries. Indeed, we should have mentioned that up front, that our program is in a sense providing a perspective on public policy issues which are particularly relevant for the developing South. This is not to say that those issues don't matter in the developed countries. You have inequality both in developing South and in the developed country. But given the fact that we are a school in the developing country, there is a emphasis in our choice of subjects and the focus on issues that really matter in the developing country context. So besides land, labor, and urban development, social policy, environment policy, analytical techniques, economic policy and reforms, we have one set of electives under the title governance. It will look into issues like law and public policy, public sector enterprise reforms, the idea of democratic governance, and so on and so forth. So there'll be plenty of electives. We don't promise that the entire menu would be made available to you. It would depend on, as Dean said, the demand, the number of people who are offering a particular elective, and we will build up the full menu over time.
Right. I find it very apt that the electives that will be, the actual electives that will be offered will be based on the laws of demand and supply, given that it is a course on public policy. Now, I've got a question on the course duration from Rita Tanya from Lima, Peru. And it's fascinating to see all the learners who have come in from all parts of the world today. I mean, we've got people from Japan, from Nigeria, from Ghana, from Peru, etc. So Rita is asking, how long in years do I have between the end of the program and to get the thesis approved? So there are really two questions over here. Is there a dissertation or a thesis component to this program? And if so, how long will it take to complete? Professor Malhotra?
Yeah. So first of all, the duration, the ideal time in our view is 2 years for this program, but we offer a slightly flexible track. So you can take up to 3 years to complete the program, depending upon the balance of workload and studies that you can strike at your end. So between 2 to 3 years, you are expected to complete. The thing about the thesis or the second capstone project, you are meant to submit it at the end of the second year, should you choose to do a two-year track, should you take the two-year track on the program, which means you will start working on this thesis at the end of the first year, and gradually over the year, under the guidance of your assigned faculty, you would be working on the thesis, and you would have a clear month and a half to finally put together the report or the thesis after you have done the courses at the end of the fourth term. So clear timing to complete the thesis would be about 6 to 8 weeks after you have completed the courses, but you will actually start beginning on this solo project at the end of the first year. So you'll be working over the whole year to then be able to submit the report before the end of the second year, should you take a 2-year track. But in a 3-year track, you'll have a little more of a time. I don't think we can go into the details here, but we'll be happy to respond to that query if you really want to know.
Right. So much like any other online program, the MA Public Policy offered by the OP Jindal Global University will be slightly, slightly flexible. I agree. I've got 3 questions that deal with the background of the learners that are coming in. So we've got Peter Fagan, who's an American living in Japan. He mentions that, stats and data are, and data analytics, these are part of the foundation courses. So he's asking, do I need a math background? I've got another anonymous learner who's asking whether this course could be suitable for somebody who's already taken up an MBA in finance. And a third learner who's asking, would this be suitable for somebody with a background in STEM, right? And in the technology sector. So effectively, what we're asking is, what is the kind of student that we're looking for? What is the kind of learner that we're looking for? Do they really need to know, do they really need to have a good grasp of math? Open to anyone.
Dean, you want to go first, or what do you want me to take it?
Yeah, why don't you take it? And
okay, right. So there were many questions there. Let me start first with the question on mathematics. Yes, we need you to have some mathematics background, but not very much more beyond a high school exposure to mathematics. The skills that we are going to teach and the course we are going to have on statistical methods and all, you can pick up if you have had exposure to mathematics at high school level. It's your choice. If you feel you can bend your backs a little more, then you can even take a specialization in some of these quantitative analytical courses, but you need not, because there would be options. But insofar as the core requirement is concerned, as long as you've done mathematics at high school level, that should be enough. Those who have done mathematics beyond that would be slightly more advantageous, but it'll be easier for them to go through the course. But we would be structuring the course in a manner that we will take you from the basic concepts to the competencies level that is required or expected of you as a public policy analyst. That was the first question. The second question I'll just club together, the one which said the technology background or finance. You see, Dean Sudarshan mentioned this discipline is very multidisciplinary. And the whole idea behind taking a master's degree in public policy should be to not only use your background, your expertise, so to say, that you have acquired so far, but get exposed to the other disciplinary contexts which are very much relevant if you are to even apply your disciplinary experience into solving a social problem that you are confronting, which is what public policy is about. So we in fact encourage diverse experiences to be part of this learning process. And let me mention that when we started this program in our residential mode 10 years ago, our first batch of students included engineers, they included medical doctors, they included philosophy students, they included literature students, and of course, there were students with political science and economics background. So I don't think you are handicapped by being too narrow in your acquired experiences so far. This program actually would allow you to express that experience in a more wholesome manner, ultimately in solving the kind of problems that a policy practitioner or a policy analyst confronts in real life.
Right. So I completely agree with you, Professor Malhotra, that public policy permeates into every aspect of our lives, and it shouldn't matter what the background of our learners is, as long as they're willing to learn. Dean Sudarshan, would you like to add on to this?
I just
what
want
kind
to say
of learner
that,
are we looking for?
Mathematics is not really required to be a good public policy practitioner. What it is a language, and because economics plays a big part in the formulation of public policy. Why? Because all policies, if you are meant to implement them, will require money and resources. So allocating finance resources is what economics deals with, allocation of scarce resources. Now, economics increasingly uses the language of mathematics. The logic of economics doesn't necessarily require mathematics, but you can express ideas more economically, so to speak, in the form of a mathematical equation. And you could take a page of prose to say the same thing. So it's really a language. And if someone is not particularly comfortable with mathematics, that's all right, because they can learn it by prose, not necessarily by the equation. The equation just saves a lot of time. It looks more elegant, and those who like doing it indulge in it. But you need to be a little literate, because if you're reading an economist writing something that's important about balance of payments and uses some equations, just to have enough literacy to understand what is this person trying to say. Not that you need to use those equations when you want to communicate your ideas. So that's the role of maths in this course.
Yeah, thank you so very much, Malhotra, Dean Sudarshan. I've got a few questions that I think have been answered or addressed already. We've got a question again from Peter Fagan. How many students will be in the program, and what is the student to professor ratio? So effectively, what we're asking is the faculty to student ratio. I must hasten to point out at this point of time that at the OP Jindal Global University, beating student faculty ratio of 1:8. And that permeates into every one of our programs, including the MA in Public Policy online course as well. Is there something you'd like to add onto this?
Just one point. See, just one point that on an online mode, actually the teacher-student ratio doesn't matter, except when it comes to the guidance on your projects. That's where it really matters. And on that, we are very clear that every student would be getting a faculty guidance. So we will ensure that there is a one-on-one guidance on your capstone projects. That's where it matters, and that will be taken care of.
Wow. So one faculty member per student for every Capstone Project. That is unbelievable.
No, so let me clarify. It doesn't mean that if I'm a guide, I'm providing guidance to a student. It doesn't preclude me from guiding another student. But I'll have a one-on-one guidance for the student who is under me or who has been allocated.
Right. Wonderful. A couple of other housekeeping questions that have come up. How long is this program? As Professor Malhotra has already mentioned, the program originally is 2 years long, which is a standard for any master's program in India at least. But you can extend it by another year, depending upon your, your time management and your other responsibilities. So primarily 2 years, up to a maximum of 3 years. I've got a couple more questions about the delivery of the program. So if a program is being offered on Coursera, it is going to be 100% online. This is not a blended program at all. So most of the content in the program will be delivered to learners asynchronously, as has been mentioned. But at the same time, learners will also have the opportunity to have one-on-one interactions with the faculty members as part of their capstone project, as well as certain live sessions, which will take place from time to time. Do we want to talk a little bit about how often these live sessions are going to take place, Professor Malhotra?
Yes. So practically every week, we have live sessions in the form of tutorials, which would be taken by teaching assistant should you have some difficulty in following the material that is with you. So there'll be a weekly tutorial session with your tutor. There will be every alternate week a live session with the main instructor. Apart from that, there will be live possibilities or opportunity for you to interact live with your instructor on appointment on a weekly basis, because there'll be office hours maintained by every instructor who is teaching you a course at any point of time. So that's the way we have organized live sessions. And we have also taken care, as per the protocols that Coursera follows, that there will be an AM, PM consideration in live sessions. So there are people from one part of the world for an AM session, and there are others who would be able to take it only in a PM session. So we will have another live session organized for them.
Right. So effectively, we are catering to the entire world, and therefore we need to be available to the entire world at all points of time. But that's great. I'm not so sure whether there are any other online programs that offer this level of interactivity with our faculty members. I mean, you mentioned, office hours plus live sessions and one-on-one interactions during the Capstone project. That's absolutely amazing. I'm also extremely grateful to Dean Sudarshan for answering those questions on the Q&A box as well. Is there anything else that that our learners would like to ask? We seem to have run out of questions for now, but if there is something that you'd like to ask, now is a good time. In the meantime, let's talk a little bit more about the Capstone project, because I think that's one of the standout features of this program. Now, in our regular, our regular on-campus, in-person MA in public policy, all of our students go through this Capstone project. They're usually linked with a research center or an NGO or some kind of an organization where they carry out, their Capstone project in a real life setting. Now, how is the Capstone project going to be different or similar in the MA public policy online? Dean Sudarshan or Professor Malhotra?
Rajeev will explain this in more detail because this requires some adjustments. Firstly, it's called a capstone. Now, in architecture, the capstone is the last stone that you put into a building. It sort of is the crown, right? And in the context of our program, what it means is the opportunity to demonstrate that what you have learned in the course of the program is actually useful, meaningful, and relevant to some context or some problem, right? So you need to demonstrate that your analytical skills, your knowledge, your interdisciplinary understanding all come into play. So normally in the normal program, we send our students to work with what is called a Capstone client institution. Now we very carefully pick the Capstone client institution. We are in touch with the supervisors there. We tell them, give this student a challenging problem. We've educated the student. The student has learned a number of useful skills and techniques, and it's an opportunity to demonstrate that they can apply these skills and do something useful for you. And depending on how useful the work is that the Capstone candidate does, the client institution gives us a report on the basis of which we give a grade. Now, if we have students all over the world in different parts, from Lima and Peru and Lagos and Nigeria and Tokyo and Japan or wherever, it's difficult for us to identify client institutions in all over the world and then establish a link with the supervisor there and say this particular student will work with you as a Capstone client. And therefore, Professor Malhotra has devised a substitute way by which you do what a Capstone essentially does, which is to test your capacity to apply knowledge and skills. And he'll explain how we wish to do that.
Okay, very quickly, in our regular residential program, we normally have two internships where a student actually goes and works in the field, either with a civil society organization or a think tank or even a corporate entity, and followed by the option of doing Capstone as described by Dean Sudarshan, or writing an academic thesis, which is just at the end of the program in the third semester. The counterpart of that in our online program, as he mentioned, we have had to adapt and adjust. Instead of those internships, we can't manage internships at a global level. So what we have done is we have brought in a group project. The idea behind the group project is to track the major policy debates that are happening globally, identify some topics or themes from there, and assign them to you to be worked on in a group setting. Group setting has a learning experience in itself, and so at the end of that exercise, you are submitting a report. The second Capstone project, which is a solo project, we will be encouraging you. I mean, you'll be in direct touch with your assigned faculty who would be, by the way, I also forgot to mention that apart from faculty guidance in your Capstone project, there's going to be a faculty to mentor you. So you will be in touch with your faculty who is mentoring you over the 2 years of this program. And in the course of that discussion with him, you would be encouraged to narrow down your research area. Now, that research area could be academic purely, or it could be part academic, part practice oriented, depending upon your working context or your home country context. So your academic advisor will help you narrow it down, give it some shape before we assign a faculty supervisor to take you through that particular process. The faculty supervisor will have some expertise in that chosen area of work by you. So although we will not be coordinating with other institutions where you could actually go and do this research Capstone project, but we are trying to simulate that situation or that kind of a context by going through the process that I just described. And it will actually start at the end of the first year, with more intensive time made available to you after the coursework in the fourth semester is over. Very quickly, you have to do 16 courses plus 2 of these projects. They all add up to 80 credits to get you the degree. Each course is 4 credits, and these 2 projects, the group and the solo project, is 8 credits in all. So not only are they assigned a higher weightage, but they are Capstone in the sense being described. It'll give you an opportunity to practice what you have learned over the year.
Wonderful. So thank you so very much for explaining that in so much detail, Dean Sudarshan and Professor Malhotra. There is a question that has come up, and I know, Dean Sudarshan, you're typing out an answer, but if you could explain to our audience here today, the opportunities and the career opportunities beyond the MA in public policy.
Yeah, I'm quite happy to do that. I see that when I said this studying public policy is an idea whose time has come, I mean presently, because there was a time when many governments felt that public policy is their business and no one else needs to come into it, and they exercised, as it were, a monopoly over the formulation of public policy. But governments all over the world have come to realize, and there is a saying that war is too important to be left to generals alone. In the same way, public policy is too important to be left to those who are already employed in government. And those employed in government nowadays understand that they need to reach out. They need to reach out to think tanks. They need to reach out to NGOs who are on the field, interacting with people at the grassroots level on the ground. They need to get feedback about what people are actually thinking. And the way they can do that is by drawing in people from these NGOs and international organizations like the UN, the UNDP, where I worked, or the Ford Foundation, where I also worked. If you look at their hiring profile, the majority of their recruitments are people with a public policy degree. I mean, this is an empirical fact. If any of you wishes to check it out, you can check it out. All of the foundations, particularly the big ones, which are located in the United States, employ people with a public policy background because their business is all about public policy, whether they're in the area of health or in the area of skill development or education. All of these are public policy concerns, and therefore the employment opportunities for someone with a public policy qualification are very much larger than they used to be. And in fact, in some institutions, that is the preferred qualification.
Right. I completely agree with that, Dean Sudarshan. I mean, the world is their oyster, really, and it seems that as we even in the world of technology, as we move forward and we question how much privacy is enough and not, these are questions that deal with public policy as well. All right, so I've got a couple of more questions that have come up, and it's on chat. I would prefer that the questions be put up on the Q&A board. Stanley's asking, what are the fees and the payment terms? I think this has already been answered before, but the fees for the entire 2-year program is $6,000 or its Indian equivalent. And we've got another question from Dhitiman Das, who's asking about the role of online teaching versus the campus mode of teaching. His concern is that will the quality of teaching be any different in an online mode? Will the ability of students to absorb be any different in an online mode, right? Now, obviously, this is a debate that we've had for the last 17 odd months, and we've gone over this in many forms and formats. But are there any steps that the JSGP faculty are taking to ensure that the quality of teaching remains at par with whatever we have on campus?
Yeah, if I may just answer that, we've taken a lot of, the difference really is the online program allows a student to learn at the time that's most convenient to the student. In the classical conventional setting in a university, you will be sitting in a classroom, there is a timetable, the lecture is given, the lecturer is in front of you, you can ask questions, but it is only done at that time. After that, in most universities, these interpersonal lectures are not recorded. Whereas in the online mode, the asynchronous learning requires that we don't bore you for 90 minutes of talking. You will not find a sage on the stage, preaching to you. You will have a different kind of pedagogy where we intersperse the key points that you need to grasp, have a certain measure of repetition of that, and illustrate that with video clips, with podcast clips, whatever. So there is a variety, right? So it is not simply one talking head. And that is helpful because you're going to be studying this in your own time. You may not necessarily do these courses in a particular sequence. So asynchronous learning, online learning, has many advantages over the university education. But the quality in terms of what we wish to communicate, there will be no compromise on that, except that it is more challenging. We have to spend much more time imparting the education in an online mode to our students than we need to do in a conventional university setting. So what I'd say is that you get much more effort on the part of the faculty that's helpful to all of you.
Let me just add, just let me add one thought to what Dean Sudarshan has mentioned, and this is to answer the question. We have two levels of quality checks, one internal to the university and the other at the level of Coursera. The fact that Coursera is an established entity in this medium brings their expertise and their experience to ensure that the quality is not compromised. So I'll leave it at that. And if there are any other questions, we could take.
Well, we're almost out of time. We've got about 3 minutes left, so I don't think there will be any other questions right now. But, and I mentioned this on the chat as well, if there are any other questions from our learners about the admissions process, about the curriculum, about the pedagogy, about the design, feel free to write to us at online@jgu.edu.in. Happy to take your questions there as well. And just to sort of wrap up these proceedings and sort of segueing from Dhitiman's question on the quality of education at Jindal, it is my duty to remind our learners that, we do rank amongst the top 700 universities in the world. We are an institution of eminence recognized by the government of India. We've got about close to now 300 international partnerships with universities such as Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, UC Davis, UC California, and Stanford, etc. And our students are doing wonderful things, and they're out there changing the world. So in terms of quality of education, I don't see another choice if you'd like to take up an online program in public policy, right? I think this is, we've got one last question here. I think this has been answered already, but yes, there will be immense chances to work with professors on their research, on their projects. I noticed that Dean Sudarshan has given an individualized response to that as well. Thank you very much, Dean. It's always a pleasure. And any last words, any last comments for our learners, our audience who's here today?
Yeah, I'm very, very happy with this, the interactivity we've had. There's a lot of responsibility on the part of the students in this mode of learning, which means that, no one is sitting in a classroom taking attendance and making sure you're not falling asleep in the classroom and so on. You have to learn at your own time by listening to the recordings, and then once in a way come to a live discussion with faculty. So this is a program that's designed for people who are very committed and are keen to learn and have the discipline to listen. And maybe you can listen more than once because it's recorded, and you can listen to the lectures as many times as you wish to. But there's a lot of responsibility on each person taking the program. So the interactive sessions are really to clarify some doubts, but they are not going to replicate or repeat what is taught in the video recordings that you will have to look at. So I'll say that you should come and join this program with a keen interest in learning. I mean, and learning about public policy. It's all about, there are problems that are looking for solutions. Then there are a lot of solutions that are looking for problems. And then there are people going about looking for things to do, right? So all of this comes in to play. And so it's not just a tedious, heavy matter. I mean, because public policy affects every one of us. All of us care about what happens to us, what's happening in our backyard, how our lives are being affected, how our lives are being affected by what happens far away in the Taliban taking over Afghanistan. All of these issues concern us, right? So it's an exciting program because we will be dealing with real world questions and problems, which is what public policy does. And so it should be fun. So apart from the discipline and the willingness to learn, anyone with a looking for something that they will enjoy, to have fun with, to really say, oh, this is great. This is the program for you.
Professor Malhotra, any last words?
No, I think Dean has pretty much said whatever I wanted to. If I have to, I just would add a line. I would say that those who are committed and who are motivated, and that's what one expects from people who are working professionals, that they are the prime target for this program. And unlike the institutional checks and balances, which helps people go through their learning process, there aren't any checks and balances insofar as the learning part of this program is concerned. It really depends on your motivation, your commitment, as Dean said. But that is something, a starting point for all of you who are working professionals and who are looking to upgrade their knowledge and skill sets to do better in life professionally. And so we look forward to having many of you on this program. And as we go to take the journey together, we promise you that we'll be there to help you at every stage. And together we can make a program which would be one of a kind, especially from the context of a developing country. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much, Dean Sudarshan, Professor Malhotra. It's always been a pleasure. It was a pleasure today as well having this conversation with you. To our audience, thank you for raising these pertinent questions, for making us rack our brains with these incisive questions. And of course, I'm going to sign off with a quick remark. There is a remark by Rita Tanya on the chat, who says that I won't be allowed to attend in person. This is a 100% online course, but that is not to say that if you were to land up at our university campus, that you would not be allowed entry. We will welcome you with open arms. With that in mind, I bid you a good day, good night, good evening, good afternoon, and goodbye from this Q&A session. This was absolutely amazing. And again, if you have any further questions, feel free to write to us at online@jgu.edu.in.
Kindly mention the deadlines for the admissions, if you please.
Right. So the deadline for admissions is 25th August 2021. That is in 5 days from now. We will be rolling out our final offer letters, and we will hope that many of our audience today will be completing their applications or will be starting them at least. All right. Anything else, Dean Sudarshan and Professor Malhotra?
Thank you.
All right, that's it.
There was a question about a higher degree. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, the minimum qualification is an undergraduate degree. But if you have a higher degree in some discipline, some field, all to the good, because then you're obviously more experienced as a learner, And in the more qualifications you have educationally, the easier it would be for you to master this program and do very well in it. And so that's, but it's a different program. It's not something you would have studied elsewhere. And so there's a sense of excitement and adventure with which you can come into this program and learn. Thank you.
All right. With that in mind, I bid you all a very goodbye, and hopefully we'll see you in our virtual classes very, very soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Arjya.